So how, farm life? My father's voice carried across the reunion hall, cutting through 20 conversations at once. Richard Carter stood beside the dessert table with one hand in his pocket and a smirk I remembered too well. My mother, Diane, watched from his side, her lips pressed into a satisfied smile. Around them, relatives turned toward Noah and me as though they had been waiting 6 years to see whether my parents had been right about us. A cousin near the window gave a quiet laugh. Dad tilted his head, still waking up before sunrise to shovel manure. Noah's shoulder brushed mine, steady but silent. He knew this was my fight. 6 years earlier, my parents had told everyone I had destroyed my future by marrying him. They removed me from the family trust, returned my belongings in taped cardboard boxes, and convinced half the family not to attend our wedding. Now Dad expected me to lower my eyes like I used to. Instead, I smiled. "Farm life is going well," I said. "I'm the owner of a $150 million agricultural company." The laughter stopped. My mother blinked first. Dad stared at me, then let out a sharp chuckle. "Of course you are." He raised his glass toward the room. "Congratulations on your imaginary cows, Emma." A few relatives laughed again, but this time it sounded uncertain. Behind Dad, my youngest cousin pulled out his phone. Then another relative did the same. Fingers moved quickly across screens. One by one, their expressions changed. Aunt Margaret looked up at me, stunned. "Carter Agricultural Holdings." Dad turned toward her. "Put that away." She didn't. "It says they operate 3 processing facilities," she said, "and a national distribution network." My mother's smile disappeared. Noah remained beside me, dressed simply in a clean button-down shirt and worn boots. 6 years ago, my parents had called those boots proof that he would never amount to anything. Now several relatives were looking at him differently. Dad stepped between us and the growing circle. "That's enough," he snapped. "This reunion is not a business presentation." I could see the shift happening. For years, he had controlled the story because I wasn't there to challenge it. He had told everyone I left willingly that I was too ashamed to return, that farm life had swallowed whatever potential I once had. But I had walked into that room without asking his permission. And now the truth was sitting in everyone's hands. Noah and I left before dinner. As we drove back to the farmhouse, I told myself the confrontation was finished. My parents had seen me. The family had seen the truth. Nothing else needed to happen. 3 hours later, our doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw my father standing on the porch beside my mother. Neither of them was smiling. When I opened the door, Dad lowered his voice and asked, "Can we come inside?" For several seconds, I stood behind the glass and watched them wait. 6 years earlier, my father had refused to let me enter his house. Now he was standing outside mine. I opened the door wider. "Come in." Dad stepped into the farmhouse first, glancing at the polished floors, the high ceilings, and the framed photographs of Noah, our children, and me. Mom followed slowly. "This is lovely," she said. It was the first compliment she had given me since I announced my engagement. Dad examined the room. "You renovated." "We rebuilt," Noah answered. No apology came. No mention of the cardboard boxes Mom had left outside my apartment. No acknowledgement of the letter Dad sent declaring that no daughter of his would marry a simple dairy farmer. Instead, they sat on our sofa as though 6 silent years had been a minor misunderstanding. I remembered our wedding day, 3 rows of empty chairs where my relatives should have been. Aunt Margaret had been the only person from my side who attended. Afterward, Noah and I returned to a farm drowning in debt. I learned bookkeeping between milking shifts. We negotiated loans, survived a brutal drought, and spent winters working before sunrise, while my parents told relatives I had thrown my life away. Dad leaned forward. "How large is the company exactly?" There it was. Not "how have you been?" Not "are you happy?" I folded my hands. "Large enough." His jaw tightened. I have some business concerns. Your experience might be useful. Mom stared at the floor. You came here for advice, I asked. Dad stood and adjusted his coat. We may need it sooner than you think. Then they walked out without saying they were sorry. I watched their car disappear down the driveway and realized they had known about my company before the reunion. So why had two people who erased me suddenly come asking for help? News from the reunion spread through the family faster than I expected. Within 2 days, cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were searching for our company online. They discovered our dairy processing facilities, our agricultural technology division, our logistics network, and partnerships with hundreds of family farms across the region. The phone calls to my parents began almost immediately. Aunt Margaret said Uncle Richard sounded furious, Noah told me one evening as he walked into my office. Everyone wants to know why they never mentioned what you've built. I wasn't surprised. For 6 years, my parents had controlled the narrative because I wasn't there to challenge it. Now the facts were easier to find than their version of the story. 3 days later, Aunt Margaret called again. You need to know what's happening, she said quietly. Your father is telling everyone the separation was mutual. He's saying you chose money over family and refused every attempt to reconcile. I closed my laptop. That's not what happened. I know, but many people don't. Instead of arguing through phone calls or social media, I accepted an invitation to another family gathering the following weekend. The moment Noah and I walked inside, conversation slowed. Dad was already speaking. We respected Emma's choices, he was saying. She wanted a different life. We wished her well, but she decided success mattered more than family. Several relatives nodded sympathetically. I stepped forward. That's not true. The room fell silent. Dad looked at me without hiding his irritation. You really want to do this here? I didn't start this conversation, I replied calmly, but I'll finish it. I opened the folder I had carried with me. The first document was the certified letter my father had mailed 6 years earlier. I handed copies to the relatives standing closest. One cousin read aloud. As of today, you are no longer recognized as our daughter. Do not contact us again. No one spoke. I placed another document on the table. The paperwork removing me from the family trust. Then another. Our wedding invitation, returned unopened. Across the front, in my father's unmistakable handwriting, were 4 words. Do not contact US again. Aunt Margaret covered her mouth. My uncle slowly lowered the paper. You told us she abandoned the family, he said to my father. Dad's face hardened. It was complicated. No, I answered, it wasn't. Before he could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. The confidence disappeared from his face. He answered immediately. What? No, they pulled out. Everyone watched as the color drained from his face. I'll be there, he said before ending the call. Without another word, he grabbed his jacket and hurried toward the door. As he passed me, I caught the name of the company the caller had mentioned. I knew it instantly. I had seen it in one of our executive acquisition reports only weeks earlier. Noah looked at me. You recognize it? I nodded slowly. Yes. What does it mean? I watched my father's car disappear down the street before answering. It's happening sooner than I expected. Chapter 2 complete. Hit Geo to continue. 3 mornings later, my assistant called before I had finished reviewing our weekly expansion reports. Emma, your parents are here. I looked up. They don't have an appointment. I know, they said it's urgent. I glanced through the glass wall overlooking our headquarters. Noah was already standing near the reception area. My parents sat quietly in leather chairs, looking nothing like the confident couple who had mocked us at the reunion. Send them in. Dad entered first, carrying a thick leather folder. Mom followed without saying a word. Neither of them commented on the building. Neither mentioned the reunion. Dad placed the folder on the conference table. My company is in serious trouble. I waited. Our largest investor withdrew 2 days ago. The banks are demanding immediate restructuring if we can't stabilize within weeks. He hesitated for the first time in my life. Hundreds of people will lose their jobs. I opened the folder. Financial statements. Outstanding debt. Supplier contracts. Projected losses. As I turned another page, several supplier names immediately caught my attention. I looked back at Dad. You've been buying from Northern Valley Distribution for 3 years. Yes. And Green Horizon Processing. He nodded again. I couldn't help but notice the irony. You do know both companies are subsidiaries of Carter Agricultural Holdings. His forehead wrinkled. What? I slid the contracts across the table. You've been depending on our agricultural network without realizing it. Silence filled the room. Dad read the documents twice before looking up. You're serious? I am. Noah quietly added. Nearly 40% of your production relies on products moving through our distribution system. Mom slowly sank back into her chair. We had no idea. I closed the folder. The truth is, we knew about your financial problems weeks ago. Dad stared at me. You knew. Our executive team has been reviewing acquisition opportunities. Your company matched our expansion strategy. He looked genuinely stunned. So you already knew my business was collapsing before I came here? Yes. His shoulders dropped. For the first time since I was a little girl, my father looked uncertain. Finally, he said the words I never imagined hearing. I need your help. I folded my hands. I'll discuss contracts. Dad nodded quickly. But before we talk about business, I continued, there's something that has to happen first. He looked at me carefully. What? I met both of their eyes. Before contracts, are you ready to tell the truth about what you did to me? Neither of them answered. Mom looked down. Dad swallowed hard. Their reputation, their credibility, and perhaps their last chance to repair what they had broken now depended on one decision. Before either of them could speak, the conference room door opened. Aunt Margaret stepped inside with several relatives. Behind them came our company's legal counsel and executive advisors. Every seat around the boardroom table began to fill. No one spoke for several long seconds. The only sound in the boardroom was the quiet hum of the air conditioning. My father looked around the table. On one side sat our legal counsel and executive team. On the other sat relatives who had spent years believing I had abandoned the family. There was nowhere left to hide. I broke the silence. I'm not asking you to humiliate yourselves, I said calmly. I'm asking you to tell the truth. Dad rubbed his hands together. Then, for the first time in 6 years, he stopped trying to protect his pride. I lied. The words landed heavily. He looked directly at our relatives. I told everyone Emma walked away from this family. He paused. The truth is, I pushed her away. No one interrupted him. When she told us she was marrying Noah, I couldn't accept that my daughter wanted to build a life with a dairy farmer. I believed status mattered more than character. His voice grew quieter. I thought she was throwing her future away. Mom wiped tears from her face. I packed those boxes, she whispered. I mailed back her childhood things. I removed her photographs because I thought your father would eventually forgive her if she admitted she was wrong. She looked at me. You never were. Aunt Margaret slowly shook her head. I knew something wasn't right, she said, but I never imagined it was this. One cousin stood and faced my parents. You let us believe Emma abandoned all of us. Another added, we skipped her wedding because we trusted you. Dad lowered his eyes. I know. He didn't argue. He didn't make excuses. For the first time, he accepted responsibility without trying to reshape the story. I opened a presentation on the conference screen. "If we're being honest," I said, "then everyone deserves to know what actually happened after I left." The first photograph appeared. It showed Noah and me, standing beside an aging dairy barn with peeling paint. That was the farm we started with. The next image showed broken fencing, then old equipment, then financial statements showing years of losses. We didn't become successful overnight. I clicked to the next slide. We modernized the dairy operation one project at a time. Another slide. We reinvested every dollar instead of buying expensive homes or luxury cars. Then another. We built a processing facility so local farmers could earn more instead of selling cheaply to larger corporations. The final slides showed distribution centers, research partnerships, and hundreds of employees. Our company only grew because other farming families grew with us. I looked around the room. The value everyone talks about today wasn't created by luck. It was built one morning before sunrise at a time. The room remained silent. Not because people were shocked anymore. Because they finally understood. My father cleared his throat. "If you'll still consider buying my company." "I will," I answered. Hope returned to his face for a brief moment. "But not because you're my father." His expression changed again. "I'll do it because your employees don't deserve to lose their jobs." I slid a prepared agreement across the table. "Our offer keeps every employee. Existing benefits stay in place. Operations continue without interruption." Dad nodded gratefully. Then he reached the final page. His smile disappeared. "I won't remain CEO." "No." "I won't sit on the board." "No." "What role do I have?" "You'll serve as a transition consultant for 12 months. After that, your employment ends." He read the sentence again. Every executive decision, every vote, every authority he once held would belong to someone else. For a man who had spent decades believing control defined success, it was the hardest consequence imaginable. After several moments, he quietly signed. "So do I," Mom whispered, signing the family acknowledgement attached to the reconciliation agreement. One by one, our relatives approached me. Some apologized for missing our wedding. Others admitted they had believed every story my parents told. I accepted every apology without bitterness. Holding on to anger would only have given the past more power than it deserved. 6 months later, the acquisition was complete. Not a single employee lost a job. Many of Dad's longtime workers stayed with the company and received better equipment, improved training, and stronger benefits than before. Word spread through the community about what had happened. Ironically, the same people who once dismissed farming as an embarrassing profession now praised agriculture as one of the region's strongest industries. A few younger cousins even enrolled in agricultural business programs after visiting our facilities. Their view of success had changed. So had mine. My parents visited occasionally after that. Never unexpectedly. Never demanding. Trust didn't return because of one apology. It returned slowly, through small choices made over many months. One afternoon, I stood beside the original dairy barn where everything had begun. The building had been restored, but we kept its old wooden beams as a reminder of where we started. Across the pasture, Noah knelt beside our children, showing them how to gently feed 2 newborn calves. Their laughter drifted across the field. I smiled. 6 years earlier, my parents believed marrying a dairy farmer meant settling for less. Standing there, surrounded by the family we had built and the life we had earned together, I finally understood something they hadn't. Success was never about impressing people who measured worth by appearances. It was about building something meaningful with someone who believed in you when almost no one else did. The day my parents disowned me, they thought I was walking away from my future. They never realized I was walking toward it.